Words of Wisdom is brought to you by Essentia Health and TV3 and LB Video Productions.
I'm Betty Johnston. I'm almost 96 years old. I was born 10 miles west of Vienna, Austria, in a small town.
What was life like growing up in Austria?
Well, when I was a child, of course, we had depression too at that time, but things were going fairly good. And I went to school in that little town. We only had 4 years grade school and 4 years high school, but I went to school every Saturday too. We had 6 days a week to go to school. And I used to go, we have a little neighborhood where it was just 6 houses at the time. And it was really hard because you had to walk to school 2 miles. In the winter, of course, we had just regular top high school shoes, you know. And I remember going sliding on the little stream alongside of the road, trying to slide, you know. My mother said, you can't do that because you'll ruin your shoes. So couldn't do that one anymore. But the teaching was quite a bit different than here, you know. We had, you had to have so many things. I learned how to crochet when I was in 2nd grade, take another language in 2nd grade, and we were pushed high, you know. Education, we probably didn't have 12 years, but it was a lot put into it. And in 6th grade, we had stenography and typing, and then when you're 14, you graduate, you know. And I went to a higher education in Vienna. I had to take the train and the trolley and to get to school. I walked to the train station every day, and the train station was apart probably 6 miles, and when I heard the train come in, I would run to the next station. We were in between. I would run and make the last car in the train. I've always exercised. I did gymnastics in school, and I do it now. I exercise, I walk, and every day a mile.
Did you go to your higher education when you were 14?
Yes, yes. And of course, Hitler came when I was 10, and that changed a lot. And when I went to higher education, we had bombing every day. The 3 years, I went 3 years, I quit the 3 years because the bombing was so bad. So we had to go to air shelters, you know, air raid shelters. And one time I was at one, and one next to it got hit, and there were 7 people there. So I got home and I'm done with school. And then that was Easter in '45. The bombing got so bad from across the Danube, the Russians and the Germans. And my dad was in the First World War. And he said, you've got to get out of here. I don't want you to go through this. So my sister, her husband was in the war, you know, with the Germans, and my brother was prisoner here for 3 years. He was with Rommel in the Air Force, and we never knew where he was, you know. But my mother used to she was a seamstress. She worked for some real millionaires, you know, and I went along with her to ride my tricycle in their marble floors, you know, and got to know the family pretty well. But anyway, when they, in the middle of their big mansion, my mother and they were listening where the American station gave names of prisoners, and they heard my brother. And all in one things were easier at home, but I didn't understand it. But of course, they didn't tell anybody, because Hitler ever get a hold of it, they would have been killed, you know. So, yeah, I have had, and you know, I think about it now. I think, how in the world did you ever go through that? But you were young and you accepted, and I've learned to accept life that way. I make the best of it what I can.
Any other memories during that time of Hitler's?
Oh boy, yes, a lot of them. After after the Polish, you know, when they went into Austria, and of course there was Austrian people what were in favor of Hitler, you know, and the others stood. Well, then there was the Hitler Youth, and I was about to be, and I was really wanted to go too, because I had all my friends, you know, everybody joined it. And then I went one time, and they had to sell little books of about Hitler, you know. And I don't know, I didn't like it, so I never did go back. But this way, it was a hard time, because if you said something wrong, or somebody can make up something about you, you were shot, you were gone. And a lot of that happened also. My folks were from Czechoslovakia, from the Austrian-speaking Czechoslovakia, and there was a deaf and dumb lady there, and she would walk and work for farmers, you know, and she had and they fed her and took care of her. And all at once she disappeared. Hitler just didn't have time for people like that. And then after Hitler, of course, after the war was advancing, you know, then the Russians came, and that was another story. Like I said, my dad told us we had to get out of there. Well, we did. We fled to Czechoslovakia. My sister and her 5-year-old boy, and I. And when we got there to our destination, where my relatives, that's where we were going to stay, we turned around, and here was my mother too. My dad said you had saved her all too. But anyway, we stayed there for about 3 weeks or a month, and then the Russians came there. And of course, my grandpa had a farm, and the Hungarian military was there with their kitchen, and, you know, just in a little town. And they were leaving the next day, and the Russians were there already. And we begged them to go along, and they said, we'll get you across the border. So anyway, we went across the border, hiding. My sister, the boy, and I went out in the woods and waited. And the Russians were already looking things over at my grandpa's. And my mother was still there. And we went out there, and pretty soon my mother came a few hours later. We never even told my grandpa where we were going, because it was just that serious, you know. And we stayed overnight in the woods there, and then from there we went across with the Hungarians walking. They had horses, and my 5-year-old carried them or walked, you know. And when we got across the border, well, then they said, this is it, we can't take you anymore. But there really were Russians there. He said, they will find out that we smuggle you here. He said that then we could be in trouble too. So we just tried to do what we can, and we stayed there. And of course, by that time, we didn't have much to eat anymore. My mother, she went to a stream and caught crawfish, and we boiled those, and you had to get to survive somehow. And then we went on, and then we went to, we walked for a while, and then we got a ride from a farmer, and he said, I'll take you, you know. But anyway, he took us about 10 miles, And then we stopped at a church, and he stayed there. And I think he was probably having us for an undercover. I think he was a Nazi. And so there we left again. And then we walked about, I think it must have been maybe 15, 20 miles, and we got on the other side of the Danube. Well, we had no idea. We knew the Russians were bad, but we had no idea really what it was, because we weren't in contact with them yet. And we got to the Danube, and my house was on the other side of the Danube, and they blew up the bridge. So while we were there was people waiting to get across, just in little fishing boats to get across. And it was getting down, and the guy was, the Russians came, took one lady, and when she came back, she said that 7 Russians raped her. And her husband could do nothing. You know, I know he carried her when she came back. And my sister knew the guy with the boat, and she said, "Would you please just take the women and the children?" And he made the last trip, and it was getting dark. We got over down to the train station, and from there we went to our three stations to get to our village. And when we got there was nobody inside, nobody on the street. Everybody just was hiding, you know, and we didn't know if my dad lived or not. And when we got home, well, the fence was blown down, you know, and we walked to the house, and it was the most beautiful reunion we ever remember. So anyway, he told us so many things what happened during that time, and it's unbelievable. One of my friends, she was an old maid. She was about 30, I think, something like that, and a Russian was going to rape her, and her dad was trying to protect her, and they shot him. And she got a lung shot, but she lived, and he died. And I mean, there are stories among stories that people had to go through. One of my friends was in a chicken coop, and they fed her through it so the Russians wouldn't get her. And it was just unbelievable what people went through. And there wasn't much food, you know. And my dad was telling about that you called the neighbors in, you know, everybody helped everybody. And he had a goat, and they butchered a goat, and he invited all the neighbors in, you know, to a meal. And here, he said, came a Russian, and he moved one lady and sat down and he ate, because he knew it wouldn't be poisoned. He said he was so mad because he was sure they did things unbelievable. And they had watches from the wrist to up. And our house was totally destroyed, but my dad was smart. He put mattresses in the wall and put boards there like it was a wall, and we slept that night on the floor in the house, and there was nothing in there. I mean, they took everything. So
you had fled your home, and then you were trying to get back? Is that where you were going through all the borders?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so then of course it was really bad. We just did without a lot of food. There wasn't much food, you know, and made the bed. We had a big garden, which did help, you know, us to survive. And then anyway, it got a little better, and I went to Vienna and took a English course, you know, 6 weeks, I think. I learned English in school. And Well, while I was there, the neighbor said, well, the Americans came then, and they only had an airport there, and there was Russians all around. But we were in the Russian zone. So somebody said, well, why don't you apply for a job for the American Air Force there? And I thought, gosh, I was 17 years old, you know. And I tried, and I applied for it. And there was a captain, and they asked me questions and stuff. And finally he said, can you go to work right away? Oh my gosh, you know. Yeah, I said, I can. We were young, it was a job, you know, but it was a nice job, you know. So anyway, I worked there, and then they found out I worked for engineering and interpreting, you know, and they found out that I wasn't old enough, so I got fired. But it was just a month or two until I was 18, so I applied again. Then I got a job in base operation. I worked for a lieutenant colonel in the place as the planes came in and write the orders out where they were going and stuff with all dignitaries and stuff. It was interesting.
So was the war over at that time?
Yes. Oh yeah.
And then you were an interpreter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I worked, and then I met my husband. Yeah, that's how come I'm here. Yeah.
Can you tell us that story?
Oh, the war bride act ended in June. You know, I'm a war bride. So anyway, that ended in June, so I had to get my papers in before June to cover. This was, I think, I just found my last paycheck the other day, and I think it was May 47. And anyway, that was over in June, so I had to be out of there. Who knows, they closed it up or something, you know. So anyway, my boss helped me to go to the embassy, and you know, realizing it, little pull, and I got it done. So I came in June 1947, so I was 19 years old. And I stayed with his mother and his family. They were very poor people. And he told me about it, that it wasn't gold here like they thought, you know. He said it's a very poor family. And his mother remarried, and it had a baby. So I came there, and here was a baby, and my mother-in-law, and of course, I didn't want to say it. My husband, I mean, he realized that I thought it wasn't what I really want, you know. And he just put his arm around. He said, we'll make it ourselves. And we did.
What is the War Bride Act?
That was so many, it ended. They allowed so many war brides to come, and then they cut it off. So I made it just in time before. I don't know if it was renewed again later or not. I don't know.
So then did you move to Detroit Lakes? Is that
I moved, well, he was from Audubon, and like I said, I was there, I stayed there a month, and he was working in North Dakota someplace. He was building silos or something, which was all new to me, you know. And it was a little hard, but we made it anyway. And then we got an apartment in town, a small one with just some old couple, and it was $20 a month. Then we moved to a little house. It was 24 by 24. It was a model, and we had our first daughter. And he had a chance in '50 to buy. He worked for a company for modern heating in town here, and they offered him the building. He said, I'm young. He said, I've only had a 10th grade, you know. He lied to get into the service. And he said, and they said, well, you're smart and you're a good worker. And they gave him a good deal. And father-in-law bought us $3,000. We bought it, and we had a truck and a trailer, and we built a house in '53 out on Richard Road here in Detroit Lakes, and we just kept on. He was a good worker.
What was your business?
Modern heating. It's still by the name, but it's combined with Greens Plumbing and Heating now. So when we left, we had 7 employees. Of course, my husband died, when he was 72. He worked hard, and I always said, he always said, well, it wasn't me, it was you too. And when we first got married, I forgot this to tell you, when we had our first donor and lived in the house there, in the first one, we just I never told many people that, but I had PTSD, and one time he found me underneath the crib in the house, and I was scared, and he held me and told me, it's all right, Betty. This happened quite a few times, but after a year, I think I got over it. But I always think about what kindness it took to help me to get by. He was a wonderful man.
How many children did you have?
3. We had 3 children. 2 of them were born in a little house, and the other one was a year when we moved.
How did you manage moving to a different country and starting new and not knowing anybody other than your husband?
The thing is, I think life, you have to accept what you're handed and make the best of it. And I did. I learned, cooked and cleaned and sold, and you tell me I did whatever it took to make a life.
Essentia Health, our presenting sponsor, is proud to bring you Words of Wisdom. And TV3 and LB Video Productions.